All right then. So everybody, welcome back to another episode of Notes from the Aleph. An Aleph is a high point from which all things are visible, and from our vantage point, we'll be looking at tabletop role-playing games, their design, and the theory behind those designs. Around here, our motto is be fair, build up, and have fun. I'm your host, GriffinVarro, joined by our editor Theta, our local designer, Norman Rafferty, and our good friend and GMs, RedRabbit, and Lessons Learned. When it comes to tabletop role-playing games, I have 15 years of experience running, playing, and frequently fixing problematic rule sets at the table. Pronouns he, him, they, them. Lessons, you're up.
Hi, I'm Lessons Learn here on Lessons Learn 1 here on Twitch and Lessons Learn over at YouTube. You can find my YouTube videos on Mass Effect and other related topics. And of course, I'm playing Dragon Age Inquisition here on Twitch. So you want to join me? I stream Monday through Fridays, Monday through Thursdays, 2 to 3 times a day. So just pop on over and check me out.
All right. And Red, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Red. I'm running our iron. Can't talk. I am running our Wednesday Iron Claw game here on the Ractus channel. So come check that out if you're awake early Wednesday mornings. It's a fun time. I am also the foremost leading world expert on Vampire the Masquerade, and I consider myself occasionally a student of game design and narrative design.
All right. And last but not least, Norman Rafferty.
Hello, world. I'm Norman Rafferty, he, him, and as we said, I work for Sanguine Games, where if you have a chance to be up in Wisconsin in April, you can see me at First Squared.
All right. And now on to today's topic. So we all like to play games here, and sometimes you might lose when playing them. We've frequently talked about failing forward on the show, where you find a way to work directly around the failure and to continue on the intended path for the players. But what if you wanted that failure to stand? Losing can be fun, and today we'll talk about how to make it fun in your game. So, who would like to start off on losing, my favorite topic?
I don't know how you intend to make losing fun. It's already fun when the players lose. I mean,
Exactly. I love destroying my players. But I guess on a more serious note, my philosophy is always that I enjoy losing and even setting myself up for failure. And being the GM, of course, means that you are losing to your players all the time. But sometimes your players will actually have to lose, and you have to figure out what do you do with that now?
Well, I have the concept of the swinging door, right? Where when the players are winning, the door swings in their direction, and when they lose, the door swings on the other side. But there's always an opening, right? It's when you have, for example, many systems have a different state of success and failure. Like you have success, great success, critical success, but partial success or partial failure. Sometimes it's not about being binary. It's something about looking about situations and consequences. Because the problem with losing players is, and for me as a player, it can be that I'm stuck in a rut and we have no progression. So it comes to the point where it's like, what am I doing here if I'm never going to win? Just that the other opposite is if I'm always winning, there's no challenge, and therefore I might just tell the GM what's going to happen, and he just says, yes, that happened, and we move on, right? But I think it's a matter of consequences, right? What happens when you win? What happens when you lose? Well, how much, or if at all, right? And so if you're prepared, so when the players lose, like they get captured or they're forced to run away or they lose something important, as long as I think you give them a chance to come back from that loss, you have that give and take between the players and the GM and the game, right? But it's when it comes to extremes that you have a problem.
Oh, yeah. Well, before we started streaming, I issued my regular complaint that I don't think a lot of modern role-playing games, like tabletop role-playing games, are written with the idea of failure as a possibility. Like for example, I've been complaining about combat encounters. So there are many adventures that these days that have what I would call a event or scripted encounter. Well, not scripted, event encounter, where you'll meet some bad guys and they will attack you and you will fight them. And after you defeat them, you will find a note on them that tells you where to go. And the problem with this entire phrasing is, well, what do you mean after you defeat them? If we're going to sit down and do a stupid long combat and roll some dice, we could miss every time and they could hit every time and kill us. We could lose or get so hurt that we run away, right? I mean, right? If we can't lose this fight, if there's no chance of failure, why are we doing this fight?
Yeah.
So there's while I agree that failure can be fun, I think a lot of what I'm seeing in the scripted encounters or the way the adventures are written is there's not a lot of provisions for what happens if the players fail stuff. Now I say that because we're whipping our favorite D&D. I'm seeing a lot more changes in some role-playing games with the idea of failure as running out of time. Like Powered by the Apocalypse, and especially Blades in the Dark, have the concept of clocks, which is while you're doing this bullshit, other stuff is going on. And so it's not a question of whether we're going to all get killed or whatever. It's that if we don't work fast enough, the time is going to run out. And therefore, in theory, we fail. Because the clock expired and something bad happened, and that can be interesting in and of its own right. And you can also have what I enjoyed most about games like Blades in the Dark, which is where 2 clocks are running out. We have to pick which one we give a shit about.
Oh yeah,
Right, yeah. In that game, like the essence is that you will not solve and succeed every problem. Sometimes things will just get worse, and you are not capable of doing everything at once.
Right.
Okay,
That's like a very realistic take.
That could be fun, but I do have a problem with that, and that is that in many cases, and this goes to the role of GM, the GM controls timing, right? Even if you have a clock, usually the GM decides how fast or how slow the clock is. So sometimes when you put that situation into a player, I've been in
not necessarily in like, for example, in Blades of the Dark, they'll usually tell you, look, these clocks advance 1 tick every downtime, because Blades of the Dark is very rigid about time.
No, yeah, I know, but in most situations, I've been in situations,
so we can see those clocks ticking down. In fact, that's what I love about the clock. I've been running games for years where I've had clocks, but I haven't explained them to the players. Like, this is something I'm not sure if this is a new thing, because we've got computer games now where people are used to Skyrim, been out for 10 years, telling people, oh no, the dragons are coming and destroy everything. Now go fuck off for 200 hours doing all the side quests you want. Or Grand Theft Auto saying that too, that the entire world stops until you deal with stuff. So the idea that, if you don't finish something on time, I mean, that's unusual. I haven't seen that since Morrowind? Does Morrowind have a timer in it?
I don't think Morrowind has a direct timer, but it does have some informal ones, like when you get corrupted by disease, you technically have a timer to take care of that.
Right, well,
a more recent example would be Tyranny, where the entire basis of the game is the first thing you do is you step in and you say, this place is going to explode in 24 hours, do something about it.
And then it does.
And then it does. You can fail the game.
And I didn't like that, to be honest. I'm the kind of guy who likes to be given. I see the fun in it, but it's not for everybody.
But I think the point is more that there is a situation here in which you can fail, and it's good to set those up so that it is a state that can happen. And I guess the question from there is, where do you go after the players fail?
Should failure even be an option? We already discussed earlier, I'm quoting other role-playing games that say, not everyone wants their game to be like real life. They want an escapist fantasy. Well, it's not my escapist fantasy to fail. So, the idea that we could actually fail to accomplish our goal, that's why Rafferty has been angry at the idea of fail forward, which to me always sounds like no matter what you do, you will eventually get to the end of the storyline, and it will be a happy ending no matter what you do, because an unhappy ending would be sad. And that, to me, that ruins my experience, because I want to feel that my choices matter, and that my if I take risks, they'll be rewarded, or unnecessary risks might doom everyone. I want to feel that actually matters. If I know in the back of my head, no matter what, I'm going to get to the end, then I become detached from the process of engaging the story. I'm just here to wait for people to ask me to make die rolls, and that makes me check out. If there's not actually a chance that everything could go south, I leave. But that's me. I might be unusual.
You are one of the poor, unlucky souls whose suspension of disbelief is directly tied to like the simulation of a believable world, and I am the same way. I think for people like that, their success is meaningless without failure. But I also think there are a lot of people out there who just like to succeed. I mean, I've complained about this before in other mediums as well, because I play a lot of video games. I think everybody here does.
Well, the Dark Souls, it's hilarious. The Dark Souls RPG is coming out, and it's based off of the D&D rules. And they try to have this big intro page of describing how hardcore they are. Like, oh my god, this game is so deadly, your entire party could be killed. And raised from the dead for free at the last checkpoint. And it's like, you realize that's more generous than Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Right. So. But the other thing, too, is I think a lot of, I mean, if you want to talk about it in video gaming space, Dark Souls was not an amazingly crafted game. It was just a game that actually acted like the way games used to act before they sold out and got commercial. But like the mechanics defined the experience, and it wasn't just going to hand you your victory. And a lot of people reacted very favorably to that. And I think the people in the RPG tabletop space who want that probably not playing D&D today.
Well, it's funny because Dark Souls got this reputation of being incredibly hard, and it's not even as difficult as Demon Souls, which came before it, which is even more brutal. And
I guess Demon Souls is the patient zero for this whole effect thing. There,
right?
Like
everyone, I could dissect Dark Souls for you here, but man, we'd be here for hours if I had to talk about Dark Souls because I love it. But
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think to like focus on a simpler example, I think here's something that comes up a lot of the time. Your player just fails a skill check. What do you do now? And this happens incredibly frequently when playing. The most frequent thing I have or happen to see is like we're playing D&D or Pathfinder, and someone goes, "I would like to try to break down the door." Okay, roll a strength check. Well, you failed the strength check. Now what?
You ask all the other players to make the same roll again.
Right, and usually it's just, I will continue smashing my head against the door until it breaks. At which point, what was even the point of rolling? Well, if you fail that roll...
But that's a failure both of design and setting expectations.
Right, so let me get on second generation of that. Let me describe something that doesn't sound like a problem, but is.
Let's do it.
There might be a trapped door. Like, in order to get into this dungeon or whatever, there's a trap. You attempt to disarm it or discover to trigger it and fail. The trap goes off and does a tremendous amount of damage to one or more of your players, either killing them or almost killing. Okay, now you're in this problem where, okay, that took out a lot of us and made us so if we have another encounter, we would probably lose it. Therefore, we should probably stop, rest up, and heal to recover what we just lost. And what a lot of people are discovering in modern RPGs, like the modern interpretations of fantasy games, is that, okay, we triggered this. Oh my god, it almost killed us. Did it kill us? No. Well, we rest. Okay, you get all your hit points back. Okay, we go on. And there were no consequences for this like failure to discover it or anything. Losing time didn't advance any clocks. The dungeon's still waiting for you. Wandering monsters didn't come by and eat your face while you were doing that. Nothing bad happened while you wasted that day. And so basically, we just, in other words, if the failure didn't totally kill our party, like kill all of us, it meant nothing because we could literally just say, well, we rest and get back up. That took me less than 2 seconds to say out loud.
You're talking about a D&D, I guess other games too, but you're talking about a resource management game that is completely circumvents its own mechanic with the resting mechanic.
We don't care about food, we don't care about water, we don't care about time. Therefore, none of these are restrictions.
The only consequence is death, and even that can be reversed fairly regularly, fairly consistently. So you're talking about a game that effectively presents a lot of consequence for actions and then does not actually enforce any of those consequences because
Right.
probably
or
because
provide
players
things
complain.
that have no consequences in the first
I want
place,
to go.
other than it just doesn't happen.
I want to go back to the door, though.
Sure.
We see the door as a challenge, right? First of all, the fact that there's a binary solution to this is part of the problem. Because it's like, oh, either you make a strength check or you don't. Right?
Mhm.
There is no other way to confront this, right?
Right.
And so, what if I, slid a little piece of paper under the door? Can I do that, right? And maybe someone from the other side goes like, well, "What's that?" And they open the door for me, right?
I mean, you're talking about lateral thinking. Like, whatever you take it off, you just blow it up. I mean, I'm talking about, like, getting back to the thesis statement today of failure as a consequence. I mean, eventually you will get through that door, because they don't make break open door rolls anymore. Because, like, that was Griffin's point, was eventually you'll get through it. And my point about the trap was, even if this looks dangerous on the surface, the issue I'm always having with this is, like Red said that I was cursed with some kind of meta knowledge that I've realized that at some point this doesn't actually penalize us. Like, as long as it doesn't TPK our entire party, we're fine, because we could just, like, rest and get over it. And that makes me the bad guy in all of this, because if I'm at the table and I start saying, well, we could just rest and not care, the GM is going to suddenly bristle, going, this was supposed to be challenging and you've sucked all the drama out of everything, you bad player, you.
Yeah, it's your fault.
Right.
Yeah, but going back to a classic way of and you mentioned this a little bit about reinforcement. We're just finishing off, we're getting to that point, finishing up the part of the against the Giants situation. Well, I made some changes, but one of the things that the original text does, and they recreated it in the says that if the party attacks, kills some monsters, and retreats, the monsters are going to reinforce. They're going to reinforce their positions. They're going to bring more allies. So now the situation has changed because you have done so. Even in success, there's unintended consequences.
Right, and you're talking about a 40-year-old adventure that's been through at least 3 rewrites. If you read some of the more like the problem, and this gets into, like, the meta problem. A lot of the materials as written, and the way I'm experiencing, I've been experiencing GMs for the last 20 years or so doing this. They don't do what you describe. The adventure doesn't say, if the players do this and run away and come back, there will be reinforcements here, add more orcs, nail the door shut. I have been in too many D&D games in the last 20 years with multiple hosts where players will kill everything in the room, stop, drop camp, long rest right there, get right back up, go to the next room, kill everything, drop camp, long rest, get back up, move to the next room as if it ain't no thing.
Why do people think that's fun? These games don't take a short amount of time to experience. You're dedicating hours and they'll just do that? I don't know. Like, it blows my mind.
Well, it doesn't take any time. Like I said, if you can just say, we take a long rest, everyone can scribble out, we'd be done in seconds.
No, I'm talking about the end result of that game is a game where no one was ever in danger of anything unexpected or unplanned happening.
Or
for
more
4 hours.
particularly, what happens is that the game becomes a game of what is the most that can happen within a single fight.
Well, now you're forgetting something, and this is where I'm gonna, my other favorite thing to complain about. This is where Mercer effect kicks in.
Oh boy!
Because the way a lot of these streamed games are entertaining is that the players are making a lot of silly improv or acting in character. The Rosencrantz thing I described earlier. So a lot of it can be, we make jokes or crack wise or do that. And that's the entertaining part. And that can be hugely entertaining. Like, when I go to watch Macbeth or whatever, I kind of expect it to last 5 acts. I don't expect it to end after the second act. And if the actors are doing some improv or it's theater in the round or reacting to each other, I'm fine with expecting them to do certain, different things. But I'm expecting it's still going to last 5 acts. So I'm not here to watch them fail. I'm here to watch them and to be entertained, or to be part of it and be entertaining. And if that's your focus, that's also fine. I'm saying that's a completely legitimate way to enjoy it. But now, because this is a game design podcast, we have to point out, if the game is about improv and excitement and like that, why are we pretending that failure is a
Right. Well, I think there's another phenomenon there, which is
there are contradictory things happening here.
Well, it's the dice validation effect, which is what I'm going to call it. When you like having a character sheet that's 3 pages long and has a ton of numbers, even if you don't know what all of them mean or want to engage in the systems that those numbers pertain to, like the weight on your equipment. I don't want to deal with encumbrance, but I do like that there's I've got 17 lines of rusty goblin swords. And the reason people enjoy that is because it's the illusion that this stuff matters. It's the illusion that you're playing in a simulation, but without any of the momentary upsets that come with the failure of your failed decisions or bad luck.
Yeah, and you're taking the fantasy approach to it. Like I think I've talked about being versus doing before. It's nice to show up at the table and have everybody validate me as a sexy kobold.
Yes.
Everyone around the table talks to me like I am one. I talk like I'm one, and they respond to me. Whatever. Or if you look at the vampire role-playing game, every vampire, with rare exceptions, all the vampires are really sexy. And I'm not here to king shame the Nosferatu. They're all idealized versions. When you show up at the vampire game, you spend a lot of time other people validating your choices of what kind of character you are. And you see that in a lot of games. And there's a large number of people who show up at the role-playing game because if they weren't showing up to be validated, they could go play a computer game. I mean, the computer game would let them, especially an MMO, where they could still hang out socially with other people and do stuff. So this game is attracting a lot of people, to role-play and act out. And that's why I'm like we've had our big, long fight against games that reward XP for killing or rewarding XP for vague things like story or whatever that is. When we're more role players, we're asking you should be rewarding us for playing in character or making the GM laugh or being impressive. We're being rewarded for acting out.
Yeah,
and those are all good, and that's why we're getting back to the concept of failing forward. The Rosencrantz metaphor came up with because Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are going to get to the end of Hamlet no matter what, or to where they wind up in Hamlet. So, if we can't actually lose, like Red said, it's we're rolling dice because the dice are supposed to empower us because when we succeed, it looks awesome. And I'm talking as Rafferty where I'm getting annoyed where we're spending a half an hour playing out this kind of combat where I already know the bad guy is going to get away, or we're going to get to the next thing, or we can't actually die here. And this is taking away valuable time when people could be validating my sexy koboldness.
Yeah, and I want to underline that there's nothing wrong with playing a sexy kobold or enjoying the role-playing aspects of a role-playing game. I think that's fine. I know I sound like an asshole on these things, but I want to underscore, that's fun. I've had fun doing that. That's part of what makes this hobby so great. My issue is that people flock to a game that does not love them back because and then ignores all the parts of that game that do not work for them. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes me angry. So no, not your role playing. Your role playing is great. Keep it up.
Right. That's where the Mercer effect is coming in, where people are saying hey, I watched these guys stream and they had a lot of fun and everybody was improvising. It was great. But then when I went to this game, for some reason, they thought I should roll initiative and fight monsters. And when my hit points ran out, they just made me sit there and everyone ignored me because I was dead.
Yes,
and that's where, once again, Rafferty is angry at the game because the game told all of them to ignore you.
That's pretty funny.
Funny board game thing. I've actually seen a couple of designs that are out there that where there's some competitiveness or even cooperative gameplay. If a player ends up getting into their own personal fail state, they'll flip a character sheet and on the back is here's what you can do while you're dead, give someone a bonus or do something like that. So you still end up participating, even if, quote, your character is dead and out of the story. You still are playing the game with people. That's an interesting thing.
I think the core problem here is how we're defining failure.
Mm-hmm.
Because the issue I've been having is that many of the published adventures, published materials, have no provisions. They have no provisions for the total party kill or the retreat. They have no provisions for, oh my God, we got our asses kicked, we better go home and come back. There's no provisions for that. I bet game masters who get confused or angry at players, especially me, who suggest, okay, let's leave and come back with twice as many people, which is what rational people would do. It's like, okay, they kicked our ass, let's leave and come back with more and better weapons, which is realistically what you would do. But, a game master would look and say, oh, no, you guys are players. You're supposed to do all this by yourselves. The rest of the world doesn't exist. It's just you. You're the only one who matters. You can't go home.
I'm sure I've mentioned before just the hireling hate that a lot of GMs seem to have.
Right. The idea that this isn't a realistic world. You are the heroes for some reason. So we'll still kill you. But moving on from there, there's also the problem where they're like we said, no time, no food, no water. Like if you were realistically tracking these like an old school game, you could make the failure of it not be the total party kill, but time. A clock could expire and something that makes it moot. Like, they raised the Elder God anyway, we might as well leave. In fact, we don't want to be here. They've raised the Elder God. Or we run out of food and water, or the hirelings leave. Like, you read these old school D&D adventures, the Tomb of Horrors is not wander to the Tomb of Horrors and kill the Lich. He's already dead. It's a tomb. Is go there, find anything of loot, find it and bring it back. And so you'd have a bunch of guys with you who are supposed to carry all your loot back. You'd only be there for like a few days. You're only getting paid for like 2 or 3 weeks to do this. So, if you never found the right door or whatever, you just go home. And the idea you could fail, because you could fail Tomb of Horrors by never actually finding the right entrance.
Yeah, and by example as well, the initial part of Pathfinder Kingmaker, their module, starts you off with like exploring, and your low levels, you don't have many options. Your food and time and exploration all matter, because your expedition could come to a point where you can't eat anymore, or you end up going very slowly if you have someone who, say, can actually hunt while you're out there, but they could fail too, and you end up starving.
And also,
that's definitely an interesting timer. It encouraged people to think about the logistics of what they're doing at the least, and avoid failure.
Importantly, it's multiple encounters. You can run into something and decide we are outclassed, or we can't defeat this, or we need more knowledge. Mark that on the map and let's leave, which is a low kind of failure. It's like, we didn't defeat this now, but let's go level up and find some other shit, and maybe this will be more relevant later. Which is a low level kind of failure that not a lot of games deal with. Kingmaker is a good example of one that tries to deal with that.
Yeah.
I think, but what I'm seeing with a lot of them, like with Dragon Heist and with the Candlekeep adventure I keep liking to rag on, a lot of those are written like Dragon Heist is like a lot of the Eberron adventures, where it's just terrible, where you're supposed to find some sort of secret crime organization. And in theory, you're supposed to like make rolls to do that, but they know that you might fail rolls. So basically the way that game boils down to, and I've seen this in too many published adventures, if you don't find the bad guys, they just show up and beat you up.
Right, and that goes back to like fail forward there, right? Even if you fail, the plot still continues on.
Right, and in which case, like I felt, and I always feel bad because I just wasted everyone's time asking 15 minutes worth of questions of how to deal with this problem, when none of it mattered. All we had to do was walk outside and trigger the event, and the bad guys would have attacked us.
So let's work on the scenario a little bit. So let's say that I'm making a game, and I'm saying, all right, in this module, my players need to find the secret crime organization base, and then go raid it. And so we'll sprinkle stuff around. We'll create our normal mystery, and then the players fail the mystery. They don't find the clues. They don't get anything. They ultimately flub it. They're a bunch of fighters, and they have no skills or something. So what do we do at that point? We have our base. We want them to be there, but they have also failed. How do we continue our game from there? Well, what should we do?
Well, have the organization start doing what they're doing. Now, don't attack the players directly. Have them do other things, like rob other things, and so the story is moving forward, but it's moving forward for the bad guys.
Right, and that would probably be a good point in terms of like when mysteries end up on the table. produce more evidence, have more crimes happen, and give more chances.
Well,
in that there's a new thing to explore.
this is going to sound weird when I say this. The qualifier is a failure must be something we don't want to happen.
Mhm.
Well, that's why the bad guys are doing their plan. You're not stopping them.
but
They're stealing whatever, they're killing whatever, they're doing.
Right. To add a little more into this, like Rafferty's favorite thing to complain about of, how theme is about, expressed in the game. It's like, I forget, what's the name of the demon worshipping kingdom in Pathfinder? I always forget. I can't remember this guy's name.
There's the World Wound, there's Mendev, which is constantly going on crusades against it.
The one where half their royal line of bred with devils and demons, and they're all lawful evil.
I don't know that one.
Okay. They're next to the Kingmaker thing.
Are they like in the River Kingdom area?
Moving on. I mean, I know enough Pathfinder for people to discredit it.
Time to learn.
Like, if those guys conquer the area, but you were already from there and like those guys, then if the clock ran out and those bad guys, got a huge, if not all, of the colonization of Kingmaker, that would not necessarily be considered a failure. I was mocking Tyrant Queen because we were in a party of all evil characters and I was a Dragonborn. And like I keep saying, it's like, oh no, the Tyrant Queen has shown up to take Waterdeep. Oh no! Waterdeep might switch to a shadowy control of secret cabal of criminals and beholders and now be controlled by a dragon who we could actually meet and talk to. Oh no!
The terror. It's like, that doesn't sound so terrible when you put it like that. Maybe failure is preferred.
It doesn't sound great, but don't blame me. I voted for Tiamat.
And I think this is probably a good point because failure is within context. Is this the thing you want to happen? If you are more outside of the consequences of it, it becomes a more question of like what looks better to you, right?
And this gets into caring because like we talked about buy-in in a previous cast. It's like there's no bad games, it's just players who leave. If the players weren't invested in what's going on in your story, if somebody wasn't having fun, they might just leave. So in other words, like we're talking about like what failure is. Well, is failure killing the entire party? Because almost every, like all the fantasy adventures, the D&D shit, Starfinder, all that kind of shit, they just want to kill all of you. That's the only provision they have because they have a fight. And if you lose the fight, I guess we're done because you're all dead. Mm-hmm. So that's the only place you can actually fail. Everything else you automatically have to get to. You'll get to the next programmed social encounter, the next one. You can't actually lose those. And that's a failure of design. Because, that means that all your social gathering, all your parlaying, all your clue gathering, all of that is pointless because you're going to get to the next combat encounter. The only thing that matters is the next combat encounter. Therefore, spend all your money and resources on combat because that's where you can actually lose. And that's why we're saying you have to have some provision for loss. And then that gets in the secondary issue of now you have to make your players care about your world. You have to make them care if the Tyrant Queen takes everything over. You have to make them care if this criminal syndicate and dragon heist gets foothold in a city that I guess you own a bar in now.
Right. Ostensibly, that's what you should be doing in the first place, making sure your players are invested in the world. But D&D does a terrible job at this.
But we were bitching
go ahead.
Yeah,
that goes into the other players in the world or part of the world, right? Make the stakes personal to a degree, right? What do the players lose? Not so much the world, but what do they lose? Friends? Do they lose money? Do they lose position of power? Do they lose?
Yeah, I guess it would be worth pointing out, even in the real world, whenever governments change or conquest happens, a lot of the people there, maybe their lives just don't really change.
Yeah,
what does it matter to them? It doesn't.
Dark thing to be discussing today.
It really is. Though, of course, maybe it really doesn't, especially if you're involved in the world. And these politics are above you because you have no connection to them, and no connection has been forged.
We're talking about this in a fantasy context. The one issue I have with a lot of role-playing games is that they're incredibly invested in you making your character and not caring about anything. Like Dungeons and Dragons, you can just write, I'm true neutral, fuck all y'all, or I'm chaotic good, fuck all y'all.
I remember the ages of writing 6 pages of backstory that never happened.
Right. We burned out on that. Or paradoxically, a game like Vampire, which is where you belong to a clan, but you don't, like, because buying up status in your clan is an optional rule, because that's a merit that you buy separately from everything. There's no reason to do it. It in fact makes you less powerful because you're spending experience points on clan status instead of, potence and celerity, which will actually get shit done. So, or domination, which will get other people to get shit. And moving on. You have very little, they invest all of you in making your, I know I keep running the sexy cobbled like this, but they invest all this effort in making your character and your specialness, and then dropping you into the world, and the world's supposed to entertain you. Whereas instead of starting you off with, some sort of obligation or some sort of clan or belief or social thing that you actually care about. So if it was destroyed or weakened in the world, you would be sad, and therefore, that would be a failure to you. When you make the characters all self-absorbed murder tourists, the only thing they care about is not dying.
That's why when I ran the game for you guys back in the day, I made your character essentially say that you were part of the system, right? You were, I believe the term was justicards, right? So you were there to make sure the system survived, and each one of your characters had a reason to be there. And as the situation evolved, it's like, oh, this is personal to me, right? I have ambition to do this. I want to do that. It wasn't simply a matter of getting gold and getting rewards.
Right. And I want to point out, that's a positive example of the Mercer effect, the method acting joke of what's my motivation here? You made all the players show up with a motivation. But I'm sorry, I cut right off.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say that's bootstrapping. That's it's a really good, strong technique to start with, because you don't have to. You're not telling the players this is a blank canvas, bring something to it. You're saying there's something here, and we're telling you that you care about it, and that can get people's brains working. They can start thinking critically and then investing in the world in a way where they find their own things to care about, which ultimately is what you need to play off of. But I do think it's a good technique for starting that, because again, blank canvases are scary for people.
Right, and that's why I get mad, back from our previous guests, why I get mad at the role-playing game, because the role-playing game doesn't tell you to do that. A lot of them just tell you, do whatever you want or be yourself, and realize yourself, without even having the most essential motivation that everyone should write down, which is, why are you in this party?
Right. I want to pull back a little bit and look at some narrative hooks, right? Because before you know anything about the rules or anything about the game itself, someone told you, hey, come play D&D because you get to be a hero who slays dragons, right? Like, ultimately, people, the win condition for you before you know anything about the game's win conditions is living out this fantasy experience and playing out these iconic genre fiction scenes. Like, I'm going to use Dragon Slaying because I think it's on the cover of every fantasy role-playing game ever made, and I think it's a good one because people, when they think about role-playing games, they think about the dude with the sword and the shield and the red dragon breathing fire at him. So, when you look at that and work backwards and look at the way adventures are designed in a lot of these games, a lot of them are just things that you do to build up the drama for that point where you slay the dragon, right? And so someone who's not really looking at this critically will think the game is about you playing through these throwaway story sequences until you get to that point where you slay the dragon. Rafferty already brought this up. But I think that's interesting too, because you're still looking at the game as a linear thing, as a Mercer effect style play that you're just quipping through instead of experiencing. But I think that when you realize that the world is going to react realistically to the way that you play and the decisions that you make, that's when I think players start to actually build real investments in the details of your world. And that's what I strive to do, is create a game where this is why I also think that failure is an important part of the game, because once you can realize that not everything you come up with is going to work and that you're not destined by the game to beat the red dragon at the end, then suddenly the game becomes a lot more real. You're experiencing something, you're not just narrating a group story. So that's why I think it's important And I think that's a key perspective on how the hobby works that a lot of people lack. Maybe that's me being gatekeeper here or elitist or something, but that's why I think failure is an important part of the game.
No, I would agree with you. I mean, I think one of the main things I don't think that's explained, because I don't think people know what this is that tabletop role-playing games, we mentioned this before, tabletop role-playing games move forward in linear time. They don't rewind to a checkpoint and reset the world. And like there's almost, like, with the exception of like Dark Souls, the RPG that's like the role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons is never written that if your entire party gets wiped out, they just all wake up at the inn and carry on. Or if they go up the hill to the Lost Cavern of Sajkant and all get killed, they all just get resurrected at the end and go right back there, and the monsters have all repopulated. Like the video game mentality, that the idea that the world doesn't progress until you progress in it. And people have experienced the video games have been out for like 3-4 decades, guys. More people will have experienced a computer game before they've experienced a tabletop role-playing game. And even then, the MMOs don't do it. If you've played Elder Scrolls Online or World of Warcraft, you can go on the same quest multiple times, where like the same guy offers you the same item. You could have 5 of the same quest item, whatever. In other words, the role-playing game is a challenge because everyone agrees the tabletop role-playing game is linear time. You don't go back to a previous point. You do something, the repercussions happen. Things don't respawn. Like anything you do now is going to have a repercussion later. And that's a big pill to swallow, because I don't think people have had experience with that. If you've played computer games before, you've not seen failure as an option. You've seen restarting as an option.
But is it really translating to role-playing games, or are designers thinking that that's what role players are? Because I really haven't experienced that in any table where people are going like, well, where do I get my restart, right?
Well, no. I think they kind of know that, but yeah, I think what you're saying is designers. Like literally, I'll agree with you. I don't think the designers know that, because I keep pointing at modern written adventures that are being published by Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons guys, and they're dropping in all this stuff in there they got from computer games, because they didn't get them from the 80s D&D style adventures or the pulps they were inspired by. Where they're describing the lights that are on the walls, like the torches or glow crystals. Like old school designers didn't talk about that. If you forgot a torch, fuck you. Or like I said, the idea that, when the Tyrant Queen attacks, you'll all join the resistance and go to this place where a fight is waiting for you. Like if you blew off that fight and came back 3 weeks later, it would still be there with those idiots still behind their A-bales. It's like,
but that's also another thing I want to say. It's like, we're talking also about states of success and failure, but the reasons why you might fail. Because we also have to be careful about the sense of quote unquote fairness. What feels or doesn't feel fair. Because it's entertaining to have a failure if it feels like, yeah, we tried, we did our best, but we failed, versus we were just being dumb.
Right.
And we were being punished for being dumb.
Right, that's what real challenge is. Like, I'm angry at challenge rating as a concept in gaming of, we have to make the bad guys have this many hit points and this much DPS so we can fight them fairly, and then make it a challenge whether you might, win or lose one of your guys. But, like, we don't see a lot of that talk, or it's very vague when they talk about the storylines, like you just said. In order for failure to have meaning, we had to be informed. If we just wandered around for a couple days and then you told us, by the way, the queen took over the kingdom, and we didn't know, that's where clocks are brilliant. You tell the player you're running out of time. And because the players have been informed that if we don't do this, this bad thing will happen, that's where the game comes in. You've informed them that this is here and given the players resources to deal with it. Now it's a game.
Yeah. But now, does it eliminate the sense of challenge if you give the players, at some point later, an ability to redress that? Not simply, okay, I know that you made all these rolls, but you just have to wait around for combat. give the players tools, well, narrative or mechanically, to be proactive and go like, okay, I know the clock is running out. Can I do something to delay this clock so I can deal with other clock, right?
Oh, yeah,
Or is that too much, giving the players too much control, and then it's like, well, it doesn't really matter because you're always going to solve it anyway.
Well, I mean, we want to get rid of just solve it anyway. I mean, like the idea here is the idea of, I mean, let's get rid of fail forward, mixed success, and talk about controlling loss. Because like you have to give the players resources and decisions that they can make, which are, and this is the important thing, which are trade-offs. Like, for example, we're going to mount an expedition to the barrier peaks. Here's your money. Buy some shit before you go. Well, do we buy food? Do we buy henchmen? Do we buy weapons? Do we buy a mix of these things? Those were our choices. And if we go up there and we win or we lose, these were the choices we made. So if we brought the wrong shit, that's still a failure. But once again, it was a minor failure to control. Then you go there and you start running off the time. You only brought this much food. Therefore, when you run out of food, you're just going to starve to death, and we're just going to end this adventure. And that's also a problem where I talk about like the game design. Like you have a problem where D&D keeps adding stuff like create food and water, or like the long rests where you can just ignore all of this. You know, or we talked earlier where if you're ignoring these kinds of constraints, then they're not failure points. These are, and like you just said, well, what if we run out of food? Well, we've got rangers. Can't they hunt for food? Yes, but while you're hunting for food, you're not doing other shit. And then a good game has provisions for that of, let's do some downtime. You'll memorize some spells. You'll reorganize stuff. You'll craft a new Gatling gun made of wands, and you'll go hunt for food. That will use up time, but will gain us more resources. And once again, in other words, we're getting away from a single pass-fail roll to we have to decide how we deal with failure. Do we push ahead and rush with shitty stuff to do what we need right now, or do we regroup and prepare knowing that might run out the clock? But that way, when we fail, we felt like we had an informed decision on how we failed, and we failed because of risks that we knew about. And that way, we'll have the ultimate buy-in. That way, even if we fail, we can say, well, look, we try. And I want to emphasize, that's my big thing to emphasize is we tried. When it's just make a roll to open a door, okay, eventually we get inside. Okay, we need to get a bunch of traps. All right, they wound us, we rest. Okay, now we have the big fight. I don't feel like I tried. It's like I just repeated back what you told me to do. It didn't feel like a trial. So, I mean, I guess that's my big summary of, in order to make failure like meaningful, there have to be lots of little failures, and the players have to be informed of the risks before they happen, or have some idea of what might happen. So that way, you know, that way it feels like we're, you know, spinning plates. And I have to like end all of this by saying that we already quoted the thing I'm going to make fun of a lot, which is some people don't play games to have, you know, some people aren't playing games for this kind of shit. Some people
Some
are
of
playing.
us, like us and Rafferty here, play to be angry.
Well, no, I play because I enjoy the plate spinning. Like I am. I mean, I always bring this up because I'm the problem child. I'm the person who like was sitting there minding my own business, and then when the very last encounter comes by, I suddenly unload some 9th level power word annihilate spell that nobody even knew I had on my sheet, even though I've had it on there for like 5 play sessions. And like suddenly, like, wait, Rafferty, you were an engine of death this entire time. I'm the hoarder. I'm the one. But that makes me, once again, getting back to the failure thing, I like to be prepared. And I like to have that event where I meet something and then totally annihilate it. And unfortunately, this confuses game masters. Because a game master will confuse being well prepared for a problem and dealing with it with, that must have not been a challenge. Rafferty destroyed that in a single round. That wasn't a challenge. Whereas I'm over here being Rafferty going, oh my God, thank God 5 sessions of planning have finally paid off.
You and I have the same mindset here. I also like will do these massive plans, and then when I pop them, people are like, wait a second, what? This is crazy. This ruins everything. It's like, but I solved all the problems simultaneously now because of everything you gave me.
Right. And I'm with Griffin. I want to point out that that's the paradox of gaming. We gave you this character with 3 fucking pages. We gave you these splat books filled with hundreds of rules. We gave you all this meta to juggle. We gave you a fixed amount of points or feats or skills or whatever to spend. We tell you your character is your one-player object and give you all this control over it. Of course we're planning nut jobs. You put a spreadsheet of make-believe in front of me. Don't tell me I can't use that to prepare.
So speaking of nut jobs and wrapping this up a little bit, let's go ahead and end off on a fun note. And I'm gonna ask everyone. So tell me about a time like your players failed and what you did afterwards. Lessons. What have you got? What was your solution to some people failing?
Yeah, I had a run of players who were just could not really find a name of a ship.
Mm-hmm.
They just could not. So eventually they ended up in a bar trying to find somebody to talk to. And I had this old orc warrior with a giant axe, and they were low-level players. And it turned out to a fun RP section because the orc figured out what they wanted, but he made them, he kept insulting the elf in the party to try to goad them to fight, but they couldn't kill him because even if they could gang up and kill him, he was at least going to kill one of them, and they were not going to get what they wanted. So it was about 5 to 10 minutes of them just trying to this guy, they knew what I was doing. I was goading them to a fight, but the guy was like, whatever, insulting the elf and insulting the other party member, especially the elf. And eventually they got what they wanted and they had to walk away because I reminded them, by the way, there's this giant axe that's resting against the table. So, just so you know.
Threaten them back into place. Perfect.
They got what they wanted, and I was, but they had to earn it, right? They had to deal with a surly old pirate orc that carried a giant axe that doesn't like elves.
Yeah, they had to change their tactics a little bit. That's kind of fun. Red, what about you? Tell me about a time your players have failed. What you did.
Well, I was racking my brain for a really good one, but I think most recently I had a bunch of vampires trying to make a trade. They were trading a hostage for a box of illegal ammunition in a subway station, and the negotiations weren't going their way. So one of them pushed this negotiator off into the subway tracks, and then were surrounded by their gang, who are all packing heat. Essentially, it turned into a very brutal firefight. The ammunition in question was vampire killing ammunition, which means these guns work like actual guns and not like guns do in World of Darkness games typically. And they quickly found themselves surrounded, and one of them was torpid, very close to final death. So they surrendered. Most of them surrendered, except for the one who started the whole thing, who grabbed the prize they were after and booked it out of the subway. And then
success at the price of everyone. That's a Pyrrhic victory right there.
Yeah, no, it was not bad. So we basically got an extra scene out of it where the guys that were captured had this nice little role play moment with the person who captured them. They learned a little bit more about the enemies. They did a little bit of negotiation, and then they used their vampire powers to bust out. So it maybe was a little bit fail forwardy, but I like to think that it was it was not a clear victory, right? Like they did get what they wanted to, and it didn't end the game for everyone, but it was a little bit more twisty than it would have been. And maybe next time they won't try to solve a negotiation by pushing someone onto train tracks, I guess. I don't know.
Always good proposition there. Don't open with push person on train tracks. What about you, Rafferty? You've run games. Tell me about your failures.
More of a closer. All right. We want to end on a positive note, so I'm going to end on a funny story.
Here we go.
Right. So one of the cool things about Iron Claw is it has an attack and counter system, and what's really cool about that is that if you tie on the attack and counter roll, you simultaneously hit each other. I'm mentioning this because there was one fight where the players go to the bandit camp, and the bandit said, they're here to really get a hostage, and the bandit king doesn't really want to fight the player characters because they look kind of badass, and so he says, well, okay, here's the deal. I'll let the hostage go if you can defeat me in single naked combat. And the other guy is the players like look around and go, well, we've got the armadillo guy there who put all of his points in freaking like resolve and soak. He doesn't know how to fight barehanded, but he's indestructible. So okay, we accept. And so they strip down the claws, naked in tooth and claw, and they get into a big fight. And of course, what's hilarious is that the last round of combat, they attack each other, they tie on the defense roll, they both hit each other, and both do exactly enough damage to each other to knock each other out, which is a unique situation that can show up in Ironclaw, because of the way that works. And so they both hit each other and fall unconscious. And so they're both unconscious at the same time. So, like, I want you to imagine, like, I drew a picture of, like, a bunch of bandits standing around there and a bunch of player characters over here and, like, a hostage in a cage. Hostages, plural, in cages, because they're here for one, but there's a bunch of other ones. Like, they just, and then thud. And then everyone's just standing, like, for a moment, just staring. And then finally one player says, well, I guess I get my sword out. Everyone gets their swords out!
Yeah. Beautiful. I was going to see Bandit pulls out a coin, flips it.
Yeah. No, it was one of the players had to break the silence by saying, well, I guess I'm going to get my sword. Like I said, as soon as you do that, like, that's it. That's all anyone needed. So, and the big fight they didn't want to happen immediately happened. Plus, they're out their best guy. But they're out their leaders, so it was... But that's one of my favorite moments, because that's a fail forward scenario, because it was like, it wasn't they just won and got what they wanted or they were defeated. It was because, like, I didn't know what
because they failed. The scenario changed.
It's what really makes a role playing game great, because it was an emergent moment. It's a, if I may say so, it's a triumph of the design, because the design allowed for simultaneous KO. And it was a triumph of, like, the players, because they rose to the challenge to do it. And it was something that like, we wouldn't really have scripted it that way. It only came out of it's a unique to the tabletop role playing. And it was just a beautiful, like, just a tense, beautiful moment of like, wait, where were we supposed to, like, just, if it's happened in a movie, it would be amazing. So yeah, that's why I like to, there's a couple of them, but I like to point to that one, because it was like that's an example of nobody got what they wanted.
Next time, we're going to go ahead and talk about funding the Rafferty movie here. It'll be great.
Yeah.
But for now, that's going to be it for today's Notes from the Aleph. We stream episodes bi-weekly, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. We can join us live at twitch.tv/Ractus. We also stream and record weekly tabletop games on the same channel, and you can come join us when we start at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sundays and Wednesdays. Norm Rafferty here is a partner and writer of Sanguine Games. Check out sanguinegames.com and join us on Reddit and Twitter, and look forward to the upcoming Book of Quarrels Ironclaw expansion book. Be sure to go ahead and book RedRabbit for a game over at startplaying.games as RedRabbit. And of course, be sure to check out Lessons Learned at Lessons Learned 1 on YouTube and Twitch, and check out the variety of things he's written up on Amazon today. And be sure to come back and like, subscribe, and comment for us, and come see us all again. Until next time, everybody, see you later.